Uh-huh. So hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me again for another webinar in the Celebrating Disability webinar series. This webinar today is on the social model of disability, and again I've asked Sarah Burrell to join me to give her expertise and her personal perspective on the subject, because I think unlike a lot of other subjects, I mean there are some clear kind of definitions within the social model, but I think unlike a lot of other subjects within disability inclusion, the social model is very personal for disabled people in the way that they can use it as their philosophy if they so wish, and so I thought that it would be really good to have somebody else's point of view that might be slightly different to mine, not contradicting but just coming from another standpoint, to help develop the wide picture of kind of the social model and how it influences the workplace. And again, we have Layla, who is our closed captionist today, who is taking closed captions for us, which is awesome. Thank you very much. So Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, I'm Sarah. I run my consultancy, Cerebral Inclusion. I'm here today to support Effie in discussion, and yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we shall start with just an overview of what we will be covering today. So in very short terms, we're going to cover the definition of the social model and also talk about what it means for us in a personal point of view, from Sarah and my perspective, to help shape the fact that it can be very individual sometimes. We're going to talk about the relevance of the social model of disability in business and in society as a whole. We're going to talk about some of the terminology around that is framed really within the social model, and again how that terminology can be individual to people, and I think that that's something that people have been asking for. I have a few questions that come up quite a lot from people about which term should I be using when talking about disabled people, and we're going to talk about that specifically today, so hopefully that'll be helpful for you. We've got an action point for you as usual as well, and then we'd love your questions. So whilst we are leaving questions till the end, just because it's easier for Sarah and I to manage, and it's easier to manage the time, please put them in the Q&A throughout, and then they won't go anywhere, they'll just be there when we're ready. Just a quick thing about access requirements once again. Both Sarah and myself are disabled with different requirement needs. I would ask you, if possible, to stay away from using the chat box, just because things disappear really quickly and it's hard for us to find what you are saying. If you can possibly put it in the Q&A section, even if it is a comment, that would be really helpful. However, if the chat box is the one that you need to use, we will have less to look through, so that will be okay. But if you can be mindful of them, we'd really, really appreciate it. I'm just getting up my notes. There we go. So what is the social model of disability? So I think we discussed that I would start, Sarah, and then you join in. Yeah. So the social model of disability is a philosophy that many disabled people follow and many businesses follow, that states that the disability is external. And that it's built by society, not giving disabled people the tools and the facilities to be able to manage the way they need to manage. So by that I mean I have a physical disability, cerebral palsy, which means that I struggle with dexterity. All four limbs are affected and I can't walk very well, and I need help with lots of personal things as well. However, the fact that I can't walk and I use a wheelchair is not the reason why I can't get onto the third floor of a building. The reason why I might not be able to get up to the third floor is because there are stairs and no step-free access for me. So if there was step-free access to that third floor of a building, then I, like lots of other people, would be able to access the rooms that I need to on that third floor. So the social model, and I've just given a very brief example of one aspect, and we're going to look into it more. The social model is a way of looking at the world that says, actually, the disability is not within the disabled person alone, and it's not for the disabled person to hold on to alone. It's about society putting things in place to mitigate the barriers that disabled people face on a daily basis, to make sure that they can be included and active and engaged in society the way that people want to.
Can I just add
Yes, please.
a little bit to that? I think the important thing to remember here is that actually this model was developed by disabled people. And so it's a very engaged model, and when we talk about disability, like Essie was saying, we actually recognise that the barriers in society are disabling, and actually the impairment we might have or difference we might have creates no barrier in itself, but society is built and thought of and have mindset surrounding the idea of a barrier there. And actually, when we recognise these barriers that make life more difficult or challenging, we remove the barriers, we create an equal choice-ridden and much more empowered way of life, and actually that leveling the playing field, be it in attitude, be it in mindset, be it in environment, that thing is where we have to grasp and understand impairment versus disability and what they mean in the context of this model.
I agree, and I think it's also, as you were saying, Sarah, it's also important to mention that it was designed by disabled people, but it was also designed by physically disabled people. So it was designed by wheelchair users. So when the social model was thought about and first theorized, people were thinking about it in terms of physical environment and physical access, which is still very much the case. But I think that we've evolved our thinking to think more about the wider implications of the barriers in society. So we think about the physical barriers, but we also think about kind of the mental health barriers, and we think about the attitudinal barriers, and we think about the structural barriers, the way that the society is structured, that create those barriers for disabled people to, as you said, feel empowered and do what they want, how they want, when they want to. If I could share a personal anecdote, which has recently kind of evolved my thinking around the social model. During lockdown, I've been struggling with depression and anxiety. And when I went into kind of how I was feeling, I thought, well, you know, personally, the social model does not touch on mental health, because my mental health is internal to me. It's in my mind. The only person that can fix this is me. But through Sarah's support and through kind of being able to, you know, because I am, you know, I do consider myself an expert in this field, and having the space to think about it, I realized that it is something that can be influenced by society. So even, for example, if somebody is struggling with their depression or their anxiety or whatever their mental health struggle is at that time, there are things that society can put in place to support somebody to feel that support and to feel as though they can be the way they need to be at that time, and then have the support structures in place for coming around and coming out of that low mode or whatever mode that is at the time, and still having, you know, that way of life that they've always wanted there. when they're waiting for it.
I think that's a great way of thinking, actually, and I agree, and there's a lot of attitudinal barriers surrounding mental health and physical and disability, which are complex, and everyone being unique as well adds that multifaceted, holistic person into the mix. And actually, when we look at archaic models of disability and how stigmatized disability is and was much more, you know, that stigma is not gone yet. I mean, it's part of the issue, and that stigma is created by society and its structures and attitudes. And even when you talk about recovering from mental health, but actually we think about living with mental health issues. So actually, recovery, when we talk about recovery, it can be confusing. Actually, we wouldn't utilize the stable model, this social model, to fix anyone, like archaic models.
Absolutely.
The archaic one I'm referring to is a medical model, which ascertains fixing, we have to be fixed in order to be put back in society. When what we want to do is actually normalize and create inclusive structures, inclusive designs, inclusive attitudes, so that stigma is not there, and the management living with disability or mental health issue is very much in a person's control, and they're empowered to, with assistance perhaps, but empowered to do that independently. And this is where the complexity start to come in, and the flip turn on its head of how we perhaps think and perceive people, and actually what is needed to happen to break that down in these projects, and not just in theory but in practice.
I agree. So I mean, I think that leads us, I mean, because I am very mindful of time, and I don't want to, by moving on to different areas of this, say to people, oh, that's it, that's all. There's definitely not all, but we do only have an hour for the session, and we could carry on. I think Sarah and I could carry on talking about this for years. On one specific element. So because I'm mindful of time and we can always return to things, we're going to move on to talk about the relevance of the social model in business and in today's society as well. So Sarah, I mean, I have my views on how it is relevant right here and right now, but do you want to kick us off with this?
I think the most effective way of demonstrating this point is actually bringing up an example. I have a speech impairment, and businesses and corporations I have worked for in the past have been my ability to speak and my speech impairment have been confused. And I think that is a lack of education, a lack of awareness. And when I enter an interview or enter a room, I'm actually quick to be proactive in a manner to provide comfort and reassurance for people who have not normalised or overlap my impairment enough to actually listen to what I'm saying. Actually, when we have impairments, and Essie has her own impairments that are different to mine, but when we do present, rock up and from the age start speaking, we almost have an instantaneous reaction, an unconscious bias reaction to discomfort and unfamiliarity and awkwardness that can actually blur the perception of a person. When we try and take that away, we're actually reassuring a person. In my case, I'm able to do that. I'm willing, and I enter a room that is important, and I say that actually, guys, I recognise that I do have speech impairment. Everything in the room kind of lifts, and actually the conversation can be a lot more equal, on par, because I address my impairment in that situation. I feel like that's a very lucky position to be in, to feel like I can do that. But a lot of people can't.
But the fact that that has to come from you in the first place says that the attitudes. So we're going to move on in a second to talk about, and actually I should maybe come back to what I was about to say in a second, but I've started. So the attitudes that are a big part of what shapes the social model are not there, which means that you have to take the responsibility to say, I realize that I have a speech impairment. If you have to repeat yourself, that's fine. I haven't forgotten. Don't feel uncomfortable. It's not, if you take disability out of the picture, you wouldn't say, I realize I'm a woman. If you are distracted by my boobs, don't worry about it, I know they're there. It just wouldn't happen, and it just wouldn't be accepted. And I'm imagining that the participants are either gasping or laughing because it's just an outrageous thought. But it's the same thing. It's something that's part of us, something, as you said, that's not something that needs to be fixed, not something that's wrong with us. It's something that a lot of people are proud of, and I, for one, feel shape who I am. But it's something that we have to explain away and almost kind of apologize for on a daily basis, which is bad.
I think I should elaborate on my point then. So I completely agree with all of what you just said, and it shouldn't be up to me to reassure and comfort, but being in the role that I'm in, being an inclusion and an inclusion consultant, it's actually part of the role. But we shouldn't have to. The idea is that attitudes should work towards normalization of and enough exposure to impairment allows that to be normalized. But with it's almost a loop. It's almost what do you call it? Actually,
like a continuum.
Yeah, because actually,
catch-22.
Without the ability to access the environment or whatever, we can't change attitudes with exposure because we can't get there.
It's absolutely, it's that age-old thing that the clients quite often say to me, but we don't need to make our business inclusive or accessible because disabled people don't come in. And I just say, well, they don't come in because of your massive step to get in. But yeah, it's that kind of catch-22. You can't have one without the other. You need to be inclusive in order to welcome and invite and learn from and engage with. Can I share my personal point of view as to why I think that it's relevant in business and today. There are many reasons, but the one I'm picking, my personal kind of what experience of job interviews, the same, is as a wheelchair user. I don't have to state that I'm disabled, because I come in a wheelchair and it's very obvious that I'm disabled, and people can understand me. I don't have a speech impairment, so I don't say anything at the beginning. But at the end, when it comes to more questions, I always say, I am a wheelchair user. Do you have anything that you would like to ask? Obviously, they can't ask me because, they're not allowed to ask me, but I can offer the information. And then, they can jump off where I've offered. And then more often than not, I see that look of relief on people's face. Oh, phew. Oh, yes, excellent. It's kind of the elephant in the room gone, but I think it's more of, oh yeah, no, this isn't a subject we have to skim around. We can go straight in and ask the question. And then the questions come about, in your previous experience of being in the workplace, how have you managed, and, what can we do to support you? And they're quite often positive questions, but just that I have to bring it up. There are ways, and we've talked about this in previous webinars, there are ways to bring up that conversation without talking about somebody's disability, talking about what they will, what support they would need in the workplace if they were successful, and those kind of things, but only after you offer somebody the job. But I believe, I know what you were saying about being an expert, Sarah, and so there it's your responsibility, but I believe that it shouldn't have to be our responsibility, even as experts, to bring up the subject. I mean, again, I know I have boobs. You're free to look at them. Don't worry. You're not free to look at them. And actually, you're not free to just look at my wheels and assume that I can't answer your questions because I'm a wheelchair user, or because I have a speech impairment, or because I have another impairment. It should be, as you're saying, part and parcel. People should be more exposed. Disabled people should be able to feel more confident to engage in community and society in the first place, so that those conversations don't actually need to happen anyway.
But I think you said, 2 points coming off what I'm thinking. I was like, yes, actually, referring to assumptions, because so much is assumed before you've even spoken, before you've even walked in the door, into the door. And actually, when we make assumptions about someone's ability to do something, or someone's barriers, the misinterpretation of barriers can be an issue too. When we lower the angst within a situation, if anxiety and stress is lowered, to talk about these issues openly, which is what we do all the time,
Mm-hmm.
Because actually people want to know what to do. And I believe that we shouldn't just be able to be part of the trial, we should be able to strive with the best of them,
Absolutely.
It's an equal playing field. It's not create a playing field that's roughly there. It's actually, we want to equate the playing field.
Mm-hmm.
That may be more mental work, more thinking, and it is actually changing environment. And I know that environments are key to enabling people to access things, but remembering why we have a lift, or why there's a ramp there, to enable people to thrive,
Mm-hmm.
to enable people to be equal and get in the door without stress. It's a lot less inhibited when we can actually discuss in a rational way without assumptions coming in or stigma coming in.
I think that leads on pretty nicely to kind of the four areas that kind of encompass the social model. So we've talked about a couple already a little bit. So the physical environment. So by the physical environment, we mean the space that we utilize to move around. So that could be the outside space, kind of parks and roads and pavements and traveling areas, and inside places as in inside buildings and things like that, and steps and lifts and things like that. And we also talk about attitude, which Sarah's kind of really well kind of started the conversation around, about actually after, you're able to enter the building or enter the room, how are people going to include you when you're there? And how are people going to engage and make sure that you feel and are an equal member of the place that you're in? We also talk about organization. So what organizations can do, what is the structure of the organizations to ensure that disabled people are included as equal parts of that organization, either as external customers or internal colleagues or suppliers or any other people that come into that organization and work with them. And then, as I said, the structure, so structural barriers that occur. So what the businesses put in place that stop disabled people from feeling included. So for example, if let's say your interviews were all on a Friday afternoon at 5 p.m, but rush hour traffic meant for a lot of disabled people, they were unable to access your interview at that time because they physically can't get on the tube or the bus because it's too busy. So you are stopping disabled people from being able to interview for your positions, therefore limiting the amount of inclusivity and diversity in the field of disability that you have within your business, and sharing those ideas and innovating with you. Do you have anything to add to that, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you covered very well there. I mean, and I will mention which is important, is actually when we talk about environment and structures, and infrastructure wise, it's not only lifts and step 3 we have to think about. It's actually texturing on the sidewalk.
Absolutely.
Making sure it's safe for people to travel around, and making sure that there's adequate inclusive access, be it making it more comfortable for people to walk around, or making it less stressful for people to walk around. For example, placement is important. Placement of a lift is very important. You don't put a lift in, you think about where you're going to put it and where the adjoining access is. It's not all about the elements in themselves, it's about the context and environment they're put into. The structures we talk about, and the structure surrounding that interview example, for example, by giving people options as to when the interview can take place, that will mitigate that immediately. And so it's not all about complex ideas, it's about breaking it down and engaging to know where best to place things, and where best to give options.
And how to design as well. And you were so right. Absolutely, you were so right. I did not by any means give an exhaustive list, and our list together is not even exhaustive.
No.
And you will remember, if you know, the participants took part in a webinar a few weeks ago that I was doing with Sarah Teichler, talking about the inclusive and accessible environment, that it goes beyond even what Sarah and I were talking about. And what Sarah touched upon is really, really important about, you know, the placement of the doors and the lifts, and the loos and the areas, because accessibility and inclusion are not the same thing. We could get into a restaurant through the back door, but it doesn't make us feel included. It's accessible, but it's not inclusive. It doesn't make us feel welcome and feel part of that community that the building and that atmosphere of the building are trying to create. So ensuring that every element of people's needs and how people are going to feel and people's requirements are covered, and that the physical environment doesn't just touch upon those things either. It touches upon things like hearing loops, and the equipment and the communication that people can access and how they access it, and all of those things. So you are absolutely right, Sarah, and thank you very much, because by no means can we give an exhaustive list of what it means to be inclusive in all these areas within 1 hour, or even within, you know, a 4-hour training session. But what we can do is offer you the tools to start thinking a bit more widely about what it means for you and your organization.
I mean, and touching quickly on what we haven't really talked about a bit, talked about in a second yet, but learning difficulties and also and hidden disabilities require a much more attitudinal and much more understanding than perhaps when we can clearly see them, see impairments. And for example, when communication, as you mentioned, communication is a huge one. And actually, if you were to put a shrine up to a toilet, we don't just put the toilet, we actually put a picture of a toilet, or not that, but it's
a picture representing what's going on.
And that enables everyone to understand that it's a toilet, but also it helps people to feel included when they can recognise themselves independently. Yeah, that's where it's going. And there's no interference from or need for further assistance, but actually it's independently accessible. And a person who maybe had difficulty reading or following a timetable, or and finds ordering tricky, pictorial representation can really help. And that pictorial representation is so useful in applying to everyone. Foreigners, people who come in, will also benefit. It's less. It's also obviously about access, but it's when it cuts in so nicely to being inclusive as a whole, that really makes it come together, and the purpose of it becomes apparent.
Yeah, I agree. Only because we are limited on time.
Obviously, I can't.
I'm glad that you said it, and I would love to kind of continue that flow of thought. Unfortunately, we have to park it for now. How should we go on? Let's go on to talk about terminology around the social model of disability. So I want to talk specifically about 2 terms that are quite it spread a lot of confusion for people. Before I do, I want to frame terminology. So when, as Sarah and I have been saying, when we think of the social model of disability, essentially at the basis, we're thinking about disability as being something that is not wrong, is not something that is harmful to people, is not something that needs to be fixed. Therefore, when we talk about inclusive terminology, the social model of disability shapes this in the way that we think about people being included and it being a positive thing. So terms such as, people used to quite often ask me, I don't think they do anymore because I blog a lot about it, but people used to ask me quite a lot, what's wrong with you? And I would answer by saying, well, there's nothing wrong with me. What's wrong with you? And if you're asking about my impairment, that's something completely different. Other memes that we see floating around the internet still now, the only disability is a bad attitude, which suggests that if only we can think about our impairment differently, then we wouldn't be disabled. And that, for me, is dangerous on multiple facets. First of all, it's dangerous because, for example, if somebody is struggling with mental health, for example, and they think it's all about their attitude, what is that going to do for their mental health by trying to get out of that? When actually, it's if you can turn that mental impairment into a physical manifestation, you would never say to somebody, well, if you've just got a broken leg, all you have to do is walk on it and it'll be better. You wouldn't say that. And I feel that in a little way, it's the same with mental health. You can't say to somebody, just get better and you'll be better, because it's not possible. People take it in their own time. It's also dangerous because it says to society and the wider population that actually that person deserves to have their impairment because it's just the way they're thinking. And all they need to do is think differently. So therefore, I don't need to do anything to support that person in any way. Would you agree, Sarah? Sorry, I was on a little rant. I thought I might stop for a second.
No, I mean, I'm conscious that I've taken a lot of the airtime. So
no, it's good.
I mean, just to add a little bit, like, I think that when terminology becomes too much of an associated with anxiety, people get deterred, and there's a dangerous point where terminology can become so confusing. And I think this is an important time to address the disabled people have different views on this as well. And because we're all people, we all have different perspectives and viewpoints. And actually, when someone refers to their own disability as something, you may not agree with that, but actually it's there to label in a way that they feel comfortable with, and they actually probably ask for respect for that. And actually, I refer to my disability as this, or my impairment as this, and actually respect and the proactive engagement that goes on there enables that person to feel confident when we refer to them. But we don't, that doesn't mean that term applies to another person.
Mm.
And when we were saying yesterday about kind of terms which have become derogatory over time, people get confused.
Mm.
And it's not, it sometimes is, but not, it's not from a place of it's merely from a place of what's the word?
I know the word you're meaning. I know.
Animosity.
Yeah.
But it's just they haven't actually been exposed to this before that, and so it's all an education, and we all have a role there to play in educating people actually on perspectives and how they matter and how they differ.
Mm-hmm.
The one we often talk about and have a different opinion on is what you will refer to as
A disabled person.
disabled person.
Yeah.
And actually prefer to my disability or disability as a person with a disability. But it doesn't mean that we have hand out at dawn. It means that we respect each other's viewpoint and continue.
Mm-hmm. But on that note, Sarah, I completely agree, and I think it would just be helpful because it is about personal choice, and it is about. But I think as you said, this area of what do I refer to a disabled person as causes a lot of anxiety, and I think it's important that the message that people leave with today is it is personal choice. It's I refer to myself as a disabled person, but it doesn't mean if I walk into an organization and somebody refers to me as a person with a disability, I'm going to turn around and walk out. And a lot of disabled people don't have a particular feeling about either. And I think that's for one or two reasons that it doesn't matter to them, that perhaps they haven't come across the social model of disability before. We don't all wake up with a disability and be like, oh yeah, I'm really enlightened now. With disability, we all come to things at different stages or not at all, just like anybody else. And also, sometimes it is as simple as it sounds flippant. It's as simple as what rolls off the tongue easiest, which is what used to be my stance on it. Oh, this rolls off the tongue a lot more easy than that. But as I've developed my thinking, I've gone through different ways of thinking about why I refer to myself as a disabled person. The reason I refer to myself as a disabled person rather than a person with disability is because I personally believe that as we've framed the social model and as we've explained, that my disability is external. My disability is not caused by me and it's nothing to do with me. My impairment is mine. My impairment is something that I have to find ways to deal with. But my disability, the fact that I can't get to the third floor without step-free access, that I have to explain myself when I meet people for the first time and prove myself to people, that I have to find ways around the barriers society presents to me every day. I feel like it's the disabled person part of me is representative of how I feel, that the society causes me barriers, and therefore I would like to refer to it in my title in capital letters, because for me it's a political statement that until society changes to take away those barriers that stop me from actively participating the way that I want to in an equal way in community, that's what I am. And then I'd have to find another thing to call myself, maybe a person with a disability. So Sarah, would you mind explaining why you refer to your disability or your impairment the way you do?
Yeah, so I mean, I it's funny because I too have a very similar viewpoint to yours, Letty. But I see it as I am a person first, and actually, by in my head, by putting a person bit before disability, empowers me to feel that I'm a person for my, and this is me. I'm a person, and overweight. I have a disability, and so it from me and from a similar standpoint, but different order of words. In fact, it just shows the complexities of semantics and what they inadvertently associate with in your mind. And
yeah,
and like you said, people have varying and can be quite controversial in some sense. Like in a lot of forums, when I'm when it gets to that controversial point, it's useful for me at least to take a step back, assess the situation, and think, right, what is the crux here? And it's often semantics.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes down to that, you again, you can have a conversation about that if you're rational and agree to disagree, like we are, but the end goal of it all is the same. Yeah, and
Yeah, absolutely.
it's very interesting. And again, I've taken too much, but we could discuss this forever, couldn't we? It's something we feel very passionate about, and we like to educate and inform.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think the more, you know, the participants, the more disabled people you engage in this conversation with, if appropriate, the more that would like to engage in this conversation, the more diverse the response you will get. As I said, you know, I'm not telling you how old I am, but through the years of developing my understanding of the social model of myself and where I fit in society as a disabled person, my attitude and my philosophy towards all of this has changed, and therefore my reasons for referring to myself as such have changed over time. And yeah. I think if you talk to different people at different points in their life, perhaps their reasons will be slightly different as well. So we just have an action point for you, and then I can see a hand raised and I can see a few Q&A, which is really exciting. I love questions.
Ooh, hello.
It's a very simple action point, and we've just decided to ask you to think proactively. So you can use that as broad or as kind of small as you like, but in your business, but also in your personal life as well. What can you do to proactively engage and include and be inclusive and think of disabled people in anything you're designing and anything you're doing, whether, you know, in the work kind of sense, whether it's a meeting you're hosting, whether it's how you're supporting your remote workers, whether it's how you go on to recruit people, if it's about design, how you design your products and services, how you find the information to make sure you're encompassing and empowering the biggest majority of people, but also in your personal life. How are you influencing and role modeling your behavior in order to support and influence others to think about disability as a positive and a potential that can be really tapped into in a way for people to feel empowered and feel active in society as a whole. Brilliant. Shall we go on to answering some questions? I'm quite excited.
Yeah, go ahead.
Small things excite me, Sarah.
I know.
Right, so we have a question from Disability Wales, the whole of Disability Wales. Getting people to fully understand the difference between disability and impairment can be difficult. It takes a while. Yeah, it does take a while. It's not something overnight. And like I said, kind of my philosophy around the social model has come, has been, I know that you know I'm not 20, has come over, you know, a long period of time that's longer than 20 years. So yeah, getting people to get to the point where they fully understand the difference is important, but also it's important to remember that everybody's viewpoint is valid. So Sarah and my viewpoints are different, which might also be different to Disability Wales, which might also be different to somebody else, and so on and so forth. And as Sarah says, you know, we're all working towards the same. I don't think any of us would say we don't want to develop an inclusive society where everybody feels empowered and everybody feels engaged. So as Sarah said, you know, the conversation in the middle is useful, but at the same time it's a little bit redundant. It's how we move on to get to the bigger picture. Yeah. So another question from Disability Wales: doesn't the term person with a disability imply that the person owns their disability, which is not social model? I don't think it does, but Sarah, do you want to take that a little bit?
I mean, I mean, this is the kind of thing that if you really think about this, actually, that's semantic too. And I know that we have touched on a few points today, but when people, again, disabled people interpret the social model in their own way, and being prescriptive about what that means and not putting back and saying, okay, this way of interpreting it leads to this, and this way of interpreting it leads to that. But when that murky water can drip away when we actually thought about, hey, what's the objective here? And the objective is the same, as I see what you're saying. And as opposed to causing a rift with semantics, it's important to pull back and think, okay, what's the purpose of thinking through this model? What is the purpose of that? And the purpose is to illustrate that disability comes in all shapes and sizes. Society needs to step up and adapt to it.
And if it, and I think also if you remember what Sarah was saying before about why she refers to herself as a person with a disability, she wants people to see her first. And whilst I might not have said that in my summing up, that is very relevant. I want to live in a society where I can just be seen as a person and nothing else, where I can give what I have to give without taking too much of my energy on compensating for what doesn't exist for me in the first place. So in that way, I think that if you put them together, if you can visualize them and put them together, they probably match up in a straight line pretty well. And so it is just semantics. And I think that it is, for me, maybe it's part of me feeling more in control, that I feel, okay, there isn't anything that I can do right now. I can put this out there on something else, and that this isn't my problem. It's another way of thinking about it. But at the end, as Sarah said, that it leads all in the same direction, and it's all about developing a society where we all are included, we all are valued, and we all are equal and celebrated for what we bring and give.
I remember the inclusion part of that, because actually that's all we want.
Yeah.
And being inclusive means respecting other people's views, perspectives, and accommodating where we can.
Yeah.
And accommodating in ways we may not know yet, and being inquisitive and actively listening to different perspectives, because that's actually the most important thing to take from this, I think. Well, that's what I think. Anyway.
I agree as well. However, saying that, I want to caveat with it by saying that whatever you refer to yourself as, you're not wrong, you're right, because it's your viewpoint.
Yeah.
And we are just sharing our viewpoints. We have 3 minutes and one more question. As this from Emily, as a supported employment coach during the COVID-19, how would you suggest a positive way to be inclusive and connect with those who have disabilities and impairments to encourage their confidence to be a good candidate for employment? Shall I read that again? Because there was a lot in that.
For my part,
I think for both our purposes, mine as well. As a supported employment coach during the COVID-19, how would you suggest a positive way to be inclusive and connect with those who have a disability or impairment to encourage their confidence to be a good candidate for employment?
I mean, that's a big one for 2 minutes left. And I'd be reluctant to try and approach it in time we have left, but there's a lot we can discuss there. And actually, we wanted to have a further conversation, please do let us know. Because it is a complicated situation. But engage in whatever way you can, be it social media, be it blog posts, wherever you can, to engage people from different corners of the atmosphere right now. Encourage and assist and listen and understand, and that's gonna be what people need right now. And actually, it's really understanding, we gain confidence with support. We actually talk about and to engage properly. And we engage, and we say, hey, how do you work best, and how do you want to go through this? When we ask those open questions, we get a better picture of how we can improve confidences, how we can provide support where it's needed, and how can we tailor that support to that person's needs.
Yeah.
And then therefore confidence in becoming more sure of yourself and understanding yourself better through engagement, that can give people confidence to be sure of themselves, know themselves, know their impairments, and what they can ask for, what they can request in the assistance wise, whatever it is, to make themselves thrive in employment.
I agree. I mean, that's how I was going to start as well. I mean, I just want to add to this. And Emily, you're right. If you would like, sorry, Sarah's right. If you would like further kind of input from Sarah and I on this, please do reach out to me on the email address, and then we will both respond to you. But I think absolutely engagement, but I think positive messaging for disabled people. I think I took part in a webinar this morning as a participant where they were talking about disabled people on the whole feeling more encouraged by remote working, because it meant that disabled people were able to access more and feel more part of that workplace community. However, on the flip side, people were feeling isolated. And I think that isolation is something that is not going to go away. It's something that's always been there and something that's not going to go for people. And I think the more positive messages that you can put out on social media, on other campaigning, but also when you're talking to people, encouraging people that there's nothing wrong with them, that it's not about them, that it is external, that they do have a lot of value to bring in their own way. And you'll know the people that you're working with when you're talking to people individually, but keeping on that level of encouragement and that level of empowering through telling them what they're good at and what their skills are, whether they might be soft skills or other skills, I think is the way to do it. Sarah and I talked before in another webinar about internal and internalized bias. And I think that comes into it a lot when we're thinking about confidence of disabled people, especially at the moment when people are isolated and don't have those people to jump off to say, actually, no, don't think like that. You are good enough. You can do it. Let's do it together. When you're staring at those four walls, it can be hard. So that encouragement that you see on social media and through face-to-face discussions can really bring a lot to empower. And I know that is not a full answer to your big question. I think the question is really important. So please do reach out to us for a more detailed response, because we didn't really talk about interviews. which is what you were asking. But hopefully that helped a little bit. Thank you very much again, everybody, for joining us. I, for one, have really enjoyed this session and this conversation. Sarah, I hope you have too. And also thank you, Leila, for doing our transcription for us. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Great. See you guys. Thank you for coming.
We have another 2 questions. So what I'll do, oh no, it's just saying, thank you so much, guys. So informative from Poppy. And Hannah says, thank you both. Very interesting. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you,
I really
Poppy, for that feedback.
to get some feedback. Thank you.
Great. Cheers, guys.